That's Madness from Madness on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Dan Woody Woodgate, the band's drummer, also the drummer for Voice of the Beehive, has a new album out, his first solo project. He's with me now. Welcome to Revenge of the 80s Radio, Woody.
Hi, Chris. Good. Nice to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here, too. Your new album, In Your Mind, is out. It features some excellent horns, a bit of ska influence, which is probably expected, and a lot of classic 70s pop flavor. We're going to talk about that in a little bit as we continue our conversation. But first, you came from a very musical family, so tell us about them and when you started taking a liking to the drums.
Well, my liking for the drums simply came from my brother, Nick, who was my younger brother, and he was a child prodigy. He could play everything, guitar, piano, and it was my way of joining in with him. I wasn't very good at playing any instrument, so I started bashing away on stools and bits of furniture with sticks and joined in, and then I bought a drum kit. It was just everything that Nick and I did, we did together. We were very close brothers, so it was his influence on me, really, that made me play. All our family musical, really. Granddads, both conductors for various variety acts, and the BBC choral singers, and it was anyone that went back in the family history were musicians somehow. So it was not really expected of us, but we couldn't really help ourselves.
I guess having that musical family sort of got you into the family business. But when did you realize you wanted to become a full-time skinsman?
Well, it was either being a drummer or being an artist, because I was quite good with drawing and painting. But it was just the sheer luck of finding a band that I was, that wanted me and ended up being quite successful. That was the Invaders. I mean, I had a band with my brother in the early days, in my school days, and everyone seemed to like that group that we were in. And it wasn't really a decision, this is what I'm going to do. It was it decided for me, really. I didn't really have a lot of choice. I joined the band like a lot of people do, and before I knew it, we were very successful and performing on British television programs like Top of the Pops, and jetting off to America, where we played New York and Los Angeles in the early days, and supported bands like, the Go-Go's supported us in our early days. So it wasn't really a choice of mine. It just happened.
Well, you can't forget those two appearances on The Young Ones too.
Oh yeah. But that was there were some young writers, Richard Curtis and Ben Elton, were two young writers that had managed to get a comedy program together and invited us on the show. No one knew that the Young Ones were going to do so well, but it was pioneering comedy. It was really good. It was nice to be a part of it.
And you were the only band that was on twice, by the way.
Yes, yeah. They obviously they quite liked us. So and we were very lucky as well, because although it never came off. Nothing came of it. Richard Curtis and Ben Elton wrote a series for Madness that we put to the BBC to do. So it was an offshoot of the Young Ones for us, and I suppose they could see that they just liked the band, and they could see the comedy value from seven mad North London boys getting together, but nothing came of it. But I suppose those writers particularly liked us, so that's maybe why we went on the show twice. Who knows?
That would have been very interesting. Madness with its own television show on the BBC. I guess they were inspired by that fight scene after you did Our House on The Young Ones. That was mad. The street riot. Yeah, that was really good fun. It's what do I say? How'd you meet those guys anyway? How did you hook up with Madness?
We knew all the musicians around all the schools in the area. Yeah, it was mainly to do with parties and girls and girlfriends and boyfriends of various people. It was, when you live in North London, there are lots of schools, and everyone seems to know each other. It's not a very large area, and you eventually end up playing with most of the musicians around. And I was a friend of Mark Bedford, the bass player of Madness, and he all of a sudden he appeared at a school dance, William Ellis School dance, in a band called the Invaders. And I'd never heard or seen any of these chaps before. They were totally new to me, apart from Mark and the drummer, Gary, who I did know. And they were great. They were terrible musicians, but they had something very special about them. So soon after I saw them play there, Gary left the band, and I rang up Mark and asked if he wouldn't mind trying me out, because I just thought there was something about them that intrigued me. And so I went along, and that was it, really. I mean, it was Bedders I knew, and the rest were from another world. I think it was mainly because they were older than Mark and I, and had already left school and got jobs. So I didn't really know any of them. It was a kind of strange world I ventured into.
Woody Woodgate is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Let's take it back a couple of moments, Woody. You're saying that at one point the guys from Madness were terrible musicians? They developed pretty well.
Well, yeah, they were learning, I mean, Mike Barson was never a terrible musician. That's a terrible thing to say, but Chris had only just learnt to play the guitar, and Lee had only just learnt to play the saxophone. So, we remember we were very young kids, really, in our teens, and the band was yet to develop, but they soon got good, believe me.
Maybe there's hope for me yet.
There's hope for everyone. Just keep practicing.
There you go. So remember that, kids out there. Keep practicing. You never know if you're going to have a legendary band. And I have to tell you, Madness really became timeless after a while. And you're in demand. You could just go to one of the O2 theaters and fill it up inside of weeks. When you guys were starting out, I doubt you thought you could do something like that later on in life. No,
it was only ever the world of the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Supertramps of the world, and the Genesis that ever did large, really huge, big concerts. So no, we only ever played, even in our pomp, in the height of our success in the 80s, we only ever played theatres that could hold up to 3,000 people. And that was the biggest shows we ever played. It was only until we reformed back in 1992, in London at a big festival that we played anything more than, we played to 30-odd thousand people a night at a couple of shows. And it took off from there. So we were playing the Wembleys and large venues in the middle of England, like the NEC, which is a big place in Birmingham. But no, we never ever thought we'd ever play like that, because we weren't really a big rock band, and that's big venues were only ever played by big rock bands, and we were never a big rock band. But times have moved on, and people, festivals are much better organised, and large venues have really superb PA systems, and it's much better organised. People like live gigs these days. People don't buy albums; they go to live gigs.
Woody, after several great albums and timeless tracks, Madness members went their separate ways. Interestingly enough, shortly after that, Woody, you were called into a band that featured two American singers, Tracy and Missy Belland, also with a music pedigree, to form Voice of the Beehive.
Yeah, great band. Really loved them. They wrote fantastic pop rock songs. They were a rocking band. They just needed a rhythm section. They needed a bass player and a drummer, and I was very, very, very fortunate that I went from thinking my life was over when Madness split up, not knowing what to do, straight into what I consider to be, one of the best bands around. Who they just wrote some really fantastic songs. Were really good fun to be with. Didn't take themselves too seriously. Enjoyed their music. Were great live. And I had about 7 years with Voice of the Beehive. I toured America a lot. That was brilliant. I think I toured America more with Voice of the Beehive than I did with Madness. And I think musically we were much better suited to the American market as well. I like bands with a bit of rock to them.
And Tracy Belland, the lead singer, spent a lot of time writing those songs, several years before Let It Be came out.
Yeah, no, she had a raft of really good songs, and she always seemed to, when we first joined, she never seemed to be short of some cracking good tunes. So it was a joy, really.
With me is Daniel Woody Woodgate of Madness and Voice of the Beehive. Straight ahead, we'll talk about his new album, In Your Mind, and some very important charity work he's been involved in on Revenge of the 80s Radio. I Say Nothing from Voice of the Beehive on Revenge of the 80s Radio. With me is Daniel Woody Woodgate, the band's drummer, and of course Madness's drummer, with a new solo album. Before we get to that album, Woody, you also had several other projects, something with your brother, a band called Fat, a couple other things going on. Talk about some of the interesting projects and side projects you did after Voice of the Beehive and Madness broke up, and sort of during the time that Madness got back together.
Well, it was kind of it was a strange old time after Voice of the Beehive and I parted ways, I should say. And Madness were getting back together again in the early 90s because we had the greatest hits out, and it just seemed the right time to move on. But Madness only ever did shows at Christmas time or summertime, so I had the rest of the year to twiddle my thumbs, really. I was knocking around, not really knowing what to do. So I was lucky enough to form another band called Fat, which was a rock rap band. Anyone out there who fancies checking us out, there might be some old Fat material out there somewhere. But that was really good fun. And then I was always writing continually on and off. Yeah, I've always written songs with my brother Nick, and he wrote some songs with me with Madness, and that was very successful. And he started to write more and more with me, and so much so that we decided that we'd get together and put out an album of our own. So we had, I was lucky enough to put an album out under the guise of the Magic Brothers, which was my, a brotherly kind of album that we did a couple of years ago, which was it was really good fun. And from that, because he is a schizophrenic, he's not, he had a mental illness. I linked up with a charity called Rethink, which was to promote the problems and joys of living with someone with schizophrenia. And I've just tried to kind of promote the fact that Nick, who suffers from schizophrenia, is also a very, very talented musician and can lead a normal life. So, I spent a lot of time doing that, and it was, very rewarding. And then I moved on to writing an album of my own with the help of my brother again, because he was a co-writer with me. And I came up with a Woody Woodgate album, which is all very good, all at the same time as writing with Madness, and I don't know what to say, really. It's all just fantastic.
In Your Mind is the name of the album, Woody. Let's talk about that. After all these years, what brought you on to putting together your first solo album? Well,
it all stemmed from originally writing with my brother Nick, but because his schizophrenia, he found it really hard to get out of the house. So I had to make a decision whether or not to to have an album where Nick sings everything and we can't go on the road and do anything with it, or I break away from my brother and get a new singer and a band that could go on the road. So with his blessing, because I couldn't do anything without his blessing, I found a singer, which was very exciting. His name's Dan Shears. An amazing story, really. I did some teaching years ago in a school in Hayes, up the road from where I live in Kent. That's in England, for all those who want to look at a map. And he was a student of mine, and he had the most incredible voice. And I never forgot this young student. He was just absolutely brilliant. And when I was looking for someone, his name came to mind. And it was ironic because he contacted me when I was thinking of him in the ether. He contacted me on Facebook and said, I'm doing an album. And I said, wow, great. Would you like to do my album? And we got together with songs written by myself and my brother. I got some great musicians in, like the brass section from Madness, and just fantastic musicians that I've bumped into over the years. And I finally put an album together that I'm really happy with and that I can take on the road and call my own. It's as simple as that, really.
Along with your lead singer, you also brought in a female singer. You have a nice ensemble of musicians. Tell us a little bit about them, and we'll go into some of the tracks.
Well, the female singer is my reluctant wife, Siobhan, who... the thing is, when I'm writing songs, I hear harmonies, and I just, I'm kind of, instead of waiting to get a professional in, I say to my wife, who's got the most stunning voice, I say, Siobhan, come here and just do me a favour and put some vocals on this track. So she would come into my studio, which is in the house, and lay down the vocals, and they're just so good. I just could never replace her. And she does it kind of anonymously, really. She doesn't like the limelight. She's not too keen on being up front, but she's got a beautiful voice, and we'll have to see if I can prize her out of her shyness and get her to come and sing for the world, but we'll have to watch that space. But the other musicians are just friends and acquaintances that I've known over the years who are just superb musicians, and they come along, and I'd write the bass lines with my brother Nick, and then we replace them with a real bass player, and same with the guitars. It developed from there. It was a nice process, very easy.
With me is Woody Woodgate, best known as the drummer for Madness and voice of the Beehive. He has a new solo album, In Your Mind. There is a bit of that ska Madness influence in there, but I have to tell you, I noticed listening to the album a lot of 70s pop influence in there. I mean the really good stuff. I don't mean the silly stuff. I mean the really good involved 70s pop, late 60s pop, when listening to Top 40 was actually cool.
Well, I'm a great fan of Supertramp. For my sins, I do love bands like ELO, 10cc, Paul McCartney and Wings. I mean, these are all the bands that I grew up with. I love the guitar solos of Gilmour from Pink Floyd. I'm just a bit of a, I saw all of these bands. I saw Genesis and Queen and Supertramp live in the 70s, and I lived very close to a place called the Roundhouse in Chalk Farm, and I saw all of the up-and-coming bands, Phil Collins, Brand X, and there was just loads of really fantastic music, Curved Air. It was, I'm a kid of the 70s, and I like real good 70s music. As you said, I'm glad you said not the silly stuff, because the silly stuff, we all know about.
Right.
But the silly music of the 70s. But there's been silly music from all decades.
Well, the 70s were interesting for a lot of reasons, but also that's when FM radio became a little more popular. At that time, FM radio was the experimental radio. Nobody was listening to it, so they could play music that sounded great people just started migrating that way because there was something different than what was being played on regular mainstream hit radio, and it sounded so much better. You could do things with the stereo sound. You could experiment, like I said before, and that's where this timeless music from the 70s came about, and that's where it became popular.
Yes, absolutely. There was a disc jockey or a DJ in England called Kenny Everett who played Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen and actually made it a single. No one would play a track that was more than 6 minutes long as a single ever. And it was these pioneering disc jockeys in the 70s that changed everything. It's very exciting.
Chris Cordani here with Woody Woodgate on Revenge of the 80s Radio. The album is very well produced. We talked about the retro sound. Let's talk about some of the tracks. Talk about some of your favorite tracks or the ones that sort of stand out to you the most, Woody.
Well, the album is in two parts, really. There's the more commercial sound at the beginning of the album with tracks like In Your Mind, which is the title track of the album, and there's a track called Something. They're very up and poppy, with big brass sounds. There's a track called Friday Night to Sunday Morning, which has a very kind of madnessy sound. It's got an offbeat guitar and big brass again. But I'm unapologetic about doing that because I am in madness. I've had 35 years of knowing how to craft a good pop song, so that's what I do. But at the same time, there are tracks like Mother and Shaman and the very last track, Thank You, that lend themselves more to rock genre, but I like that kind of music as well. So there's a little in there for everyone.
Interesting you mention that there are two parts to the album, and a lot of the songs have the one aspect or the other. Right in the middle of that is We're All Going to Brighton, which kind of has a mix of the two, the pop flavor plus the rock flavor that you mentioned.
We're All Going to Brighton reminds me of the Kinks' early stuff. It's kind of got a good feel factor to it, and it is kind of madnessy, really, I suppose, with... It's a summer. It's a happy-go-lucky summer song. It's a feel-good song. That's I don't apologise for doing that either. It makes you feel good. Hopefully.
Oh, I like to have a feel-good radio show too. In fact, I've always
that's good.
and in fact, I've always wanted to write the feel-good movie of the summer. That's what I've always wanted to do. There we go. And another really sharp deviation from the album is a song you mentioned just a few moments ago, Shaman. It has an 80s synth intro to it.
Yeah, I've always liked kind of fuzzy, weird synth sounds. I'm a big fan of a guitarist called Steve Hillage, who was in a band called Gong. He did some great albums, and on every track there's some kind of synthy, blippy thing going on, and it reminded me a bit of my brother Nick came up with the guitar riff, and it reminded me of kind of Shine On You Crazy Diamond and the Wish You Were Here album. And I just wanted it, it was too much like that, with the organ and the guitar, and I wanted to get it away, maybe go down my progressive rock influences. So, I do have fun with synths as well. I'm a bit of an old prog rocker at heart.
And before we wind down, Woody, once again, how can our listeners learn more about Rethink Mental Illness?
Yeah, Rethink Mental Illness is a fantastic charity who they help people with mental illness, help them through their troubles and give them advice. They also help family members who have got to live with people with mental problems. They're a support network, and they give advice, and they're just absolutely fantastic. And they bring awareness. They try and break down the barriers, the stigma, the false rumours about people with mental illness, and try and bring education and awareness to us, normal people who maybe are scared of people with mental illness. They've got a great campaign that encourages us to talk to people. Talking is fantastic because you realise that people with mental illness are, in a sense, just, normal people who are struggling like we are in life, and we're much stronger when we talk. So it's a great charity, and something that's very close to my heart, obviously, because of my brother. And that's it, really.
Woody Woodgate, thank you once again for taking time with us today on Revenge of the 80s Radio. You can keep up with Woody on his website, woodywoodgate.co.uk. That's woodywoodgate.co.uk. Let's play a track from In Your Mind, Woody. In Your Mind, new from Woody Woodgate, the title track on Revenge of the 80s Radio.